I had just told my father not to make a scene. 30 seconds later, he was staring at his phone like it had turned into a snake. The color drained from his face so fast that even my sister stopped smiling. "Wait," what he whispered. A moment earlier, he had been laughing with wedding guests, drinking expensive champagne paid for with money he claimed was for the family. Now his hand was shaking. "What do you mean the transfer is frozen?" The room went quiet. Nobody understood what was happening. Nobody except me. I slowly set my fork beside my plate and took a sip of water. My father looked up. For the first time that entire evening, he wasn't smiling. And the truth was, what had just happened to him was only the beginning. Because 3 hours earlier, after my sister's wedding, I had checked my bank account and discovered that every dollar I had spent 10 years earning in the United States Army was gone. My name is Emily Carter. At the time this happened, I was 30 years old and serving as a first lieutenant in the United States Army. If you had asked my family about me, though, you would have thought I was some kind of disappointment. My father certainly acted that way. Growing up, there were always two versions of success in our house. There was Sophia, and there was everyone else. Sophia was my older sister by 4 years. She was beautiful, outgoing, and knew how to make people like her within 5 minutes of meeting them. Teachers loved her. Neighbors loved her. My father practically worshipped her. When Sophia sold her first house as a real estate agent, Dad threw her a party. When she bought a luxury SUV, he showed pictures to everyone he knew. When she got engaged, he spent 6 months talking about the wedding. Meanwhile, I graduated from officer candidate school. My father forgot the ceremony date. I deployed overseas. He never asked where. I received a commendation. He never mentioned it. I learned long ago that I would never be the daughter he bragged about. Oddly enough, that stopped hurting after a while. The Army has a way of teaching perspective. After you've spent nights listening to helicopters overhead and wondering whether everyone in your convoy will make it home, you stop caring about who gets praised at family dinners. At least that's what I thought. Then came Sophia's wedding. The event was held at a luxury vineyard outside Napa Valley. The place looked like something from a movie. White flowers lined the walkways. Crystal chandeliers hung inside the reception hall. Every table sparkled. Every guest seemed wealthy. And every detail screamed money. A lot of money. The irony was that most of the people attending had no idea where part of that money had come from. 3 months before the wedding, my father called me. At first, he sounded emotional. He talked about family, tradition, supporting each other. Then he explained that Sophia's wedding budget had gotten out of control. They needed help. A temporary loan, he called it. Just until some real estate commissions came through. I remember sitting in my apartment near Fort Campbell while he spoke. I should have said no. Looking back, I know that. But my father had never asked me for anything before. At least not directly. And despite everything, part of me still wanted his approval. So I agreed. The money wasn't small. Over the years, I had saved nearly everything. Deployment pay, hazard pay, retention bonuses, years of careful budgeting. I drove an old truck, lived modestly, rarely took vacations. I had one goal: buy my own home someday. The account held almost $180,000. Not all of it went to the wedding. At least that's what I believed. Dad assured me that only part would be needed. The rest would stay untouched. "You have my word," he said. I trusted him. That was my mistake. The wedding itself was beautiful. I can admit that. Sophia looked radiant. Guests laughed. Music filled the air. People danced beneath strings of lights. For a few hours, I convinced myself everything was fine. Maybe this was what family looked like. Maybe helping had been worth it. Then the reception ended. People began drifting toward the exits. I stepped outside onto a stone terrace overlooking the vineyards. The evening air felt cool against my skin. A notification appeared on my phone. Routine banking alert. Without thinking, I opened the app. At first, I thought it hadn't loaded properly. I refreshed the screen. Then again, and again. The number didn't change. Available balance: $0. My stomach tightened. I checked the transaction history. Several large transfers. Multiple withdrawals. Every dollar gone. I stared at the screen for nearly a minute before calling the bank. The representative confirmed my identity. Then she reviewed the account. Her voice remained professional, calm, almost detached. According to our records, the transfers were authorized. Authorized by who? There was a brief pause. Richard Carter. My father. I remember feeling strangely numb. Not angry. Not yet. Just empty. The representative continued speaking. Something about documentation. Power of attorney. Authorization records. But I barely heard her. All I could think was, He took everything. I walked back into the reception hall. The celebration was still going strong. Sophia stood near the dance floor holding a champagne glass. My father laughed with several guests nearby. The sight of him smiling nearly broke something inside me. I approached the table. "Dad." He turned casually. "Everything okay?" I held up my phone. "Why is my account empty?" His expression changed. Not to guilt, not to shock, to annoyance, as though I were interrupting him. Around us, conversations began slowing. People sensed tension. "Not here," he said quietly. "Right here." Sophia rolled her eyes. "Emily, seriously." I ignored her. My father sighed dramatically. Then he leaned back in his chair. "You'll get over it." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "What?" "The money helped your sister start her life. You took all of it. You're young." He shrugged. "The army still pays you." A few nearby guests chuckled nervously. Dad continued. "Don't make a scene." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because of the money, because of how little he thought of me. 10 years serving my country, 10 years earning every dollar. And he acted like it belonged to him. Sophia lifted her glass. "Honestly, Emily, you're acting selfish." Selfish. That word nearly made me laugh. Instead, I looked at my father. Really looked at him. For the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. Not as my father. Not as the man whose approval I chased for years. Just a man who believed he could take whatever he wanted from me. I slowly placed my fork on the table. The metal clicked softly against the plate. Then I stood. My voice stayed calm. "Then don't make a scene about what happens next." The guests exchanged confused looks. Sophia laughed. My father laughed harder. "What's that supposed to mean?" I simply smiled. Because by then I had already made a decision. The laughter continued. For maybe 10 seconds. Then my father's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. "Still smiling," he answered casually. "Hello?" The smile vanished. His eyes narrowed. "What?" Silence. Then another pause. Suddenly he stood. "Wait. What?" Every conversation in the room stopped. I watched the color drain from his face. And for the first time that evening, I realized something important. My father thought he had taken everything from me. What he didn't know was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. My father ended the phone call without saying goodbye. For several seconds, he just stood there in the middle of my sister's reception, surrounded by flowers, champagne, and people who had spent the entire evening treating him like a king. His mouth opened once, then closed again. The phone remained pressed in his hand so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Sophia stepped closer, her white dress whispering over the polished floor. "Dad?" she asked. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer her. He looked at me. That was when I knew. Whatever he had just heard, it was connected to the transfers. I did not feel victorious. Not yet. What I felt was colder than victory. It was the stillness that settles over you right before a storm breaks open. I had felt it before in the army, in the seconds before a situation turned dangerous. Your body knows before your mind does. Your breathing slows. Your vision sharpens. Every sound becomes clear. The clink of glass. The soft hum of music. Sophia's nervous little laugh. My father took one step toward me. "What did you do?" I tilted my head slightly. "That depends. What did the bank say?" His jaw tightened. People around us pretended not to listen, which meant everyone was listening. He lowered his voice. "This is family business." "No," I said. "It became something else when you emptied my account." Sophia snapped. "You gave us that money." "I agreed to help with wedding expenses," I said. "I did not agree to let him drain every account I had." My father's eyes flickered toward the guests. He hated being embarrassed. More than guilt, more than consequences, more than the truth itself, my father hated looking small in public. "Emily," he warned. I recognized that tone. He had used it when I was 16 and questioned why Sophia got a car while I had to work weekends. He had used it when I was 22 and told him I was joining the army instead of taking a desk job he could understand. He had used it every time I stepped outside the role he assigned me. Be quiet. Be useful. Don't make me look bad. But something had changed inside me that night. "I'm not 16 anymore," I said. The words came out quietly, but they landed hard. His face twitched. Then a tall woman in a dark suit appeared near the entrance of the hall. She was not part of the wedding staff. I recognized her immediately. Margaret Ellis, my attorney. She did not walk quickly. She didn't need to. She moved with the calm precision of someone who had spent 30 years watching powerful people lie badly. Her gray hair was pulled into a neat twist, and she carried a slim leather folder under one arm. My father stared at her. Sophia whispered, "Who is that?" Margaret stopped beside me and looked at my father. "Mr. Carter." He swallowed. "Why is there a lawyer at my daughter's wedding?" Margaret's expression didn't change. "Because you used a revoked power of attorney to transfer funds from Lieutenant Carter's personal account." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the air conditioning. Sophia's face hardened. "This is ridiculous. Emily's just being dramatic." Margaret opened the folder. "No, Mrs. Whitman. Your father is being investigated for unauthorized financial activity involving a service member's account." That word changed the air. Service member. It was no longer just family drama. It was no longer a daughter being difficult. It was something banks' attorneys and federal agencies took seriously. My father tried to laugh. It came out thin. "You can't be serious. She signed papers years ago." "I signed a limited authorization when I deployed," I said. "For emergency bill payment only." Margaret added, "That authorization was revoked in writing 2 years ago." My father blinked. For the first time, uncertainty entered his face. He had known about the old document. He had assumed that was enough. He had assumed I would not remember the details, or that I would be too embarrassed to challenge him. What he didn't know was that I had learned documentation the hard way. In the Army, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. If it is written down, it better be accurate. 2 years earlier, after a close friend warned me about financial abuse cases affecting deployed soldiers, I cleaned up every legal document I had. I removed old authorizations, updated beneficiaries, changed account protections, added alerts. I never told my family. Why would I? Back then, I still believed they were careless with my feelings, not criminal with my money. My father looked at me with open anger now. "You set me up." I almost smiled. "No, Dad, you set yourself up. I just kept records." Sophia's voice shook. "Emily, this is insane. You're ruining my wedding." I looked at her dress, her diamonds, the flowers cascading from the tables, the 10-piece band still standing awkwardly near the stage. "No," I said. "My money paid for your wedding." Her lips parted, but no words came. Margaret turned a page in her folder. "The bank's fraud department froze the remaining linked transfers 15 minutes ago. Any account that received funds from Lieutenant Carter's savings may be restricted pending review." My father's face went gray. That explained the call. Not all the money had settled. Some of it had been routed through wedding vendors. Some had gone into Sophia's joint account. Some had been moved toward a down payment on a house she and her new husband planned to buy. And now the bank had placed its hand on the door before they could close it. "You had no right," my father said. I stared at him. It was such a strange thing to hear from a man who had just stolen from his own daughter. "My right," I said, "started the moment you took what wasn't yours." He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a hiss. "You think the Army makes you powerful? You think wearing a uniform means you can threaten your own family?" That one almost got through. Almost. Because a small, tired part of me still wanted him to stop. To look ashamed, to say he panicked that he made a terrible mistake, that he would fix it. But he didn't. He chose pride. So I chose the truth. "You never respected the uniform," I said. "But you were happy to steal the money I earned wearing it." His eyes flashed. A few guests gasped softly. Sophia's new husband, Mark, finally stepped forward. He looked confused, more than angry, like a man realizing he had married into something uglier than he understood. "Richard," he said, "what is she talking about?" Sophia turned on him. "Don't start." That told me he hadn't known everything. Maybe he had suspected the wedding money came from somewhere convenient. Maybe he had chosen not to ask. But judging by his face, he had not expected this. Margaret closed the folder. "Lieutenant Carter," she said, "we should leave." My father pointed a finger at me. "If you walk out now, don't come back." There it was. The old weapon. Exile. Rejection. The threat he had used for years whenever love failed to control me. I looked around the room at the flowers, the cake, the embarrassed guests, my sister gripping her bouquet like she wanted to crush it in her hands. Then I looked back at my father. "You're right," I said. "I won't." For once I didn't wait for permission. I walked out beside my attorney, past the stunned wedding guests, past the vineyard lights glowing against the dark California hills, past the life my family had built from taking pieces of mine. Outside, the night air was cold. Margaret opened the passenger door of her car, then paused. "There's more," she said. I turned toward her. Her face was serious now. Not professionally calm, serious. "What do you mean?" She handed me a second folder. Inside were copies of credit applications, tax forms, old signatures. My name appeared again and again. Some were mine. Most were not. My throat tightened as I flipped through the pages. How long, I asked. Margaret's voice was quiet. At least 8 years. The vineyard lights blurred for a moment. 8 years. My father had not made one desperate mistake. He had built a system. And somewhere inside that system, my sister's name appeared too. The first time I saw my name on a credit card application I had never signed, I felt something inside me go very still. Not shocked. Not confused. Still. There is a difference. Shock makes you loud. It makes you ask questions too fast. It makes you bargain with the facts as if the truth might become kinder if you stare at it long enough. Stillness is what comes after shock has nowhere left to go. It settles into your bones and tells you one simple thing. Pay attention. Margaret drove me away from the vineyard in silence. Behind us, my sister's wedding lights disappeared into the dark, shrinking, until they looked like stars fallen too close to the ground. I sat in the passenger seat with the folder open on my lap, turning page after page beneath the dim overhead light. A department store card, a home improvement line of credit, a personal loan, a tax refund deposit request, a vehicle financing inquiry. My social security number appeared on documents tied to addresses where I had never lived. Some forms used my old signature from years earlier. Others carried a version of my name written by someone trying to imitate me and failing just enough to be obvious. The strangest part was not the fraud itself. It was the familiarity of it. Every document had the same careless confidence my father carried at family dinners. He had not hidden his tracks well because he had never believed anyone would chase him. He had used my name the way he used my silence, as something available to him. Margaret glanced at me. "Emily, you don't have to read all of that tonight." "Yes," I said, "I do." She didn't argue. That was one reason I trusted her. Margaret understood that sometimes truth hurts less when you stop looking away from it. At her office, we sat at a long conference table under warm yellow lights. The building was quiet except for the soft hum of the printer and the distant rush of traffic outside. Margaret made coffee. I did not drink it. My hands were steady, but my stomach felt hollow. She laid the documents into categories. Unauthorized transfers, she said, placing one stack to the left. Identity misuse. Questionable tax filings. Potential credit fraud. And this. She tapped the smallest stack. This involves your sister. I looked down. Sophia's name appeared on a joint account connected to a real estate escrow deposit. Not directly criminal by itself. But the source of the deposit was a transfer from my savings account, routed through my father's personal account, then into hers. Margaret watched my face. Did she know? I thought of Sophia at the reception lifting her glass calling me selfish. I thought of her eyes not surprised when I mentioned the empty account, only annoyed that I had said it out loud. "Yes," I said. The word came quietly, but I meant it. Margaret nodded once. Then we proceed carefully. Over the next 2 weeks, my life split in half. By day, I was Lieutenant Carter. I trained soldiers, reviewed reports, attended briefings, and moved through my duties with the same discipline I had built over a decade. My uniform was pressed. My boots were clean. My voice stayed calm. No one looking at me would have guessed that every night I returned to my apartment and opened another folder full of betrayal. By night, I became evidence. I gathered bank statements from old accounts, credit reports, deployment orders proving where I had been when certain documents were supposedly signed, emails from years earlier where my father asked for temporary help, text messages from Sophia joking about me being the family's military bank. At the time, I had thought those messages were cruel. Now they looked like admissions. One evening, Margaret called while I was sitting on the floor of my apartment surrounded by papers. Rain tapped softly against the window. My dinner, a bowl of soup, sat untouched on the coffee table. "We found another account," she said. I closed my eyes. "In my name." "Yes, opened 6 years ago." I remembered that year instantly. 6 years earlier, I had been overseas. It had been one of the loneliest stretches of my life. I called home whenever I could, usually at strange hours. My father often sounded impatient. Sophia rarely answered. But they had both accepted the money I sent when Mom's medical bills came due. My mother had died before this story began. That part matters. Because if she had been alive, I think my father would have been more careful. Not better, just more careful. My mother saw things people tried to hide. She could be gentle, but she was never blind. After she passed, Sophia became the center of my father's world. Not because she was kinder, because she reflected him back to himself. She admired the same things he admired: status, appearances, money that looked easy from the outside. I was different. I was useful but inconvenient. A daughter who sent checks but asked questions. A soldier he could dismiss until payday. Margaret brought in a forensic accountant named Daniel Price. He was in his late 60s, retired from federal work with silver hair, square glasses, and the patient expression of a man who had seen every kind of respectable thief. He studied my records for 3 days. On the 4th, he asked to meet in person. When I arrived at Margaret's office, Daniel had covered the conference table with timelines. Dates, transfers, signatures, account numbers, property deposits, everything connected by thin blue lines. It looked less like a financial review and more like a map of a war campaign. Daniel adjusted his glasses. "Lieutenant Carter, he said your father didn't just take wedding money." I sat down slowly. "How much?" He glanced at Margaret, then back at me. "Based on what we can document right now, over $600,000 across 8 years. The number did not feel real. $600,000. I thought of all the times I had skipped vacations, all the meals eaten alone in plain apartments, all the birthdays missed, the Christmas mornings spent on video calls, the extra shifts, the deployments, the danger. I thought of my father telling people I didn't understand family because I left home. And all that time he had been using my life as collateral." Daniel continued gently. "Some of it was direct theft. Some of it was credit misuse. Some appears to be benefits-related fraud. There are also tax issues." Margaret folded her hands. "This is no longer just a civil recovery matter." I looked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we can sue him, and we will. But first we need to report this properly." My jaw tightened. "To who?" Margaret's voice stayed even. "The bank's fraud division is already involved. Given the identity theft, interstate banking transactions, and your military status, this may interest federal investigators." Federal. The word sat between us. Part of me wanted to stop there. That may sound strange after everything my father had done. But when the person who steals from you is your own blood, consequences feel complicated. You don't just imagine courtrooms. You imagine old photographs, Christmas mornings, hospital waiting rooms, the way your father once carried you from the car when you fell asleep at age 6. Then you remember that he used those memories as camouflage. "Emily," Margaret said softly, "you are allowed to protect yourself." I looked down at my hands. There was a small scar across one knuckle from a training accident years earlier. I rubbed my thumb over it, grounding myself in the present. "What happens if I report it?" Daniel answered this time. "Then the evidence goes where it belongs. After that, your father's choices are no longer something you have to manage." That sentence stayed with me. Your father's choices are no longer something you have to manage. I had managed them my whole life. Managed his temper. Managed his disappointment. Managed the empty space where pride should have been. That night I signed the authorizations. Margaret submitted the initial packet. Bank records. Revocation documents. Deployment orders. Transaction maps. Credit reports. Forgery comparisons. And a written statement from me. I expected to feel relieved. Instead, I felt grief. Not for the money. For the final death of the father I kept hoping might exist somewhere beneath the arrogance. 3 days later, Sophia called. I almost didn't answer. When I did, she didn't say hello. "What did you do?" she demanded. I stood in my kitchen watching steam rise from a mug of tea. "Funny," I said. "Dad asked me the same thing." "You're destroying us." "No, Sophia, I'm documenting what you did." Her breathing sharpened. "You have no idea how hard it's been for Dad." I laughed once quietly. Not because anything was funny, because the excuse was so familiar it had become absurd. "I know exactly how hard it's been for him. I paid for most of it. You think you're better than us because you wear that uniform." "No," I said. "I think I'm done being robbed by people who call it family." There was silence. Then her voice lowered. "You'll regret this." I looked at the stack of documents on my table. "No," I said. "I already regret waiting this long." I hung up before she could answer. The next morning I received a call from a number I did not recognize. A man introduced himself with a calm voice and a title that made my spine straighten. Special Agent Andrew Miller. He said he had reviewed the preliminary packet. He said there were questions he needed to ask in person. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Lieutenant Carter, we believe your case may be part of a larger pattern. We'd like to meet." I looked out my apartment window at the gray morning sky. For the first time since the wedding, I felt the storm moving in a direction I did not have to control. My father had built a system in the dark. Now someone else had turned on the lights. Special Agent Andrew Miller did not look like the kind of man who enjoyed frightening people. That was the first thing I noticed when I met him. He was in his early 50s with a calm face, tired eyes, and a plain navy suit that looked chosen to disappear in a crowd. He did not raise his voice. He did not make promises. He did not speak like someone trying to impress me with authority. He spoke like someone who had spent years listening to people lie. We met in a small conference room at Margaret's office. Daniel Price sat to my left with a binder thick enough to make the table groan. Margaret sat across from me, pen in hand, her expression unreadable. Agent Miller placed a recorder in the center of the table. "Lieutenant Carter," he said before we begin, "I want to be clear. This is not your fault." I looked at him. It was a simple sentence, maybe even a routine one, but it landed in a place I had not realized was still bleeding. I nodded once. Then I told him everything. I told him about the old deployment authorization, the revoked paperwork, the wedding money, the empty account, Sophia's reaction, my father's call from the bank. I told him about the documents with my name, the credit accounts, the tax records, the escrow deposit. He listened without interrupting. Only occasionally he asked for a date, a name, a location, a copy of a message. The Army had trained me to give clean reports, so I gave him one. But halfway through, when I described my father saying, "The Army still pays you," my voice tightened. Agent Miller noticed. He did not comment on it. He just gave me a moment. That small courtesy almost broke me. At the end of the interview, he closed his notebook. "There are two things you need to understand," he said. "First, people who commit family-based financial exploitation often rely on shame. They count on the victim staying quiet because the truth is embarrassing." I stared at the recorder. "And second, your father appears to have involved accounts, vendors, and lenders across more than one state. That changes the level of attention this receives." Margaret leaned forward. "What happens now?" "We keep moving quietly," he said. "The bank freeze will hold. We'll subpoena what we need. I strongly advise Lieutenant Carter not to engage with her father or sister directly." I almost laughed. "They keep calling." "I expected that." He slid a business card across the table. "If they threaten you, contact me." That evening I returned to my apartment and found 13 missed calls from Sophia. 6 from my father. 3 from Mark, Sophia's new husband. There were voicemails too. I deleted most without listening. But one from Mark stopped me. His voice sounded rough. "Emily, I don't know what Sophia told you, but I didn't know about your account. I swear I didn't know. The bank canceled the escrow. Our lender is asking questions. Sophia won't tell me the truth. Please call me." I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time after that. Mark had always seemed harmless. A little polished, maybe. A little too impressed by my father's confidence. But not cruel. Still, harmless people can benefit from harm. And silence is not innocence when money is moving through your life. I did not call him back. For the next 2 months, my family tried every door except accountability. My father sent texts that sounded like court exhibits. "You misunderstood. You gave permission. Family helps family. This is elder abuse against your own father." Then he switched to anger. "You are dead to me. Your mother would be ashamed. Don't show your face at Thanksgiving." Sophia took a different approach. She sent old photographs, us as children in matching Christmas pajamas. A picture of Mom holding both of us at the lake. A blurry video of Dad teaching us to ride bicycles. Under one picture she wrote, "Do you really want to destroy what's left of this family?" I looked at that message for nearly a minute. Then I typed back, "I didn't steal from this family." After that she stopped sending pictures. The freezes spread quietly. First, Sophia's home purchase collapsed. Then a vendor sued for unpaid balances after the wedding account was restricted. A luxury car payment bounced. My father's business credit line was suspended pending review. Each consequence arrived like a crack in glass. Small at first, then branching. Meanwhile, Agent Miller's office kept building the case. I was not told everything. That was frustrating, but I understood it. Investigations have their own rhythm. The best thing I could do was stay disciplined, stay available, and stop trying to predict the next blow. But my father made prediction easy. He could not stand silence. So he created an audience. 3 months after Sophia's wedding, she and Mark announced a private celebration at a country club outside Sacramento. The invitation never came to me directly. Sophia posted about it online instead. A fresh start. A proper reception for those who truly supported us. The caption was meant for me. I knew it. Margaret saw it too. "Do not go," she said immediately. I had stopped by her office after work, still in uniform, my hair pulled tight, my shoulders aching from a long day. I wasn't invited. That has never stopped families like yours from making sure you hear what they say. She was right. By Friday evening, 3 relatives had forwarded me screenshots. Sophia had told people I was unstable, jealous, angry that no man wanted me. My father had claimed I fabricated the bank issue because I resented Sophia's happiness. One aunt wrote, "Honey, I don't want to get involved, but your father says you're trying to have him arrested over a misunderstanding." I replied with one sentence. Then he should have no trouble explaining the misunderstanding to investigators. She did not answer. The celebration took place on a Saturday night. I did not attend. Not at first. Instead, I spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment with the kind of intensity that usually meant I was avoiding emotion. I folded laundry, scrubbed the kitchen counters, organized documents I had already organized twice. At 7:14 p.m., Agent Miller called. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, "are you alone?" My hand tightened around the phone. "Yes. We're executing several actions tonight. I can't give you operational details, but your father and sister may attempt to contact you. Do not answer." I looked out the window. The sky had gone purple at the edges. "Are they at the country club?" A pause. "I can't discuss location." That meant yes. My heartbeat slowed. Not from fear, from recognition. The storm had arrived. At the country club, according to what I later learned, the evening began exactly the way my father wanted. He stood near the bar in a tailored suit, telling anyone who would listen that he had been blessed with one loyal daughter. Sophia wore a pale blue dress and accepted sympathy like it was applause. Mark stood beside her, smiling stiffly. There were flowers again, music again, expensive food again. Another performance of success staged in a room full of people who did not know the foundation was already collapsing beneath them. Around 8 o'clock, my father's phone buzzed. Then Sophia's. Then Mark's. A few guests noticed them step away. The first call came from a bank officer. An account had been formally restricted. Not delayed. Not reviewed. Restricted. Then came the lender. The underwriting file had been referred for fraud review. Then a business partner called my father, furious because a transaction tied to one of his accounts had been halted. My father tried to keep smiling. People later told me his face looked shiny with sweat. Sophia began crying in the hallway. Mark asked her loudly enough for 2 cousins to hear, "Did you know where the money came from?" She slapped him. That was when the room changed. Not because of the slap. Because just after it happened, 2 black SUVs pulled up near the front entrance. Men and women in dark jackets stepped out. They did not rush. They did not shout. They simply moved with purpose. The kind of purpose that makes every guilty person in a room stop breathing. My father saw them through the glass doors. For once he did not speak. He backed away from the bar, one step then another. Sophia grabbed his arm. "Dad," she whispered, "do something." But there was nothing left for him to do. The doors opened. Agent Miller walked in first. Behind him were 2 other agents and a local officer. The music faded awkwardly as the band stopped playing mid-song. Guests turned. Silverware paused above plates. Every lie my father had told suddenly had to stand in the same room as federal badges. Agent Miller's eyes found Richard Carter immediately. "Mr. Carter," he said. My father's voice came out small. "Number." Agent Miller approached with a folded document in his hand. "We need to speak with you regarding unauthorized financial transactions, identity theft, and related fraud." Sophia sobbed, "This is a mistake." Agent Miller looked at her. "Mrs. Whitman will need to speak with you as well." That was the moment my father finally did what he had accused me of doing. He made a scene. He shouted that he was being framed. He pointed at relatives. At Mark. At the agents. At me, even though I was not there. "This is my daughter's doing," he yelled. "She's angry because we didn't worship her uniform." Nobody answered. Because the badges had not come for a family argument. They had come for records. Around 8:31 p.m., my phone lit up. A text from my father. "Call me now." Then another. "You stop this tonight." Then Sophia. "Please, Emily, please." I sat alone in my quiet apartment holding the phone in my hand. For years I had answered every crisis they created. This time I turned the phone face down and let consequences ring. The first time I saw my father after the country club incident was 6 weeks later. Not at a family gathering. Not at a holiday dinner. Not at a reconciliation meeting. I saw him in a federal courthouse. The irony would have made me laugh if it weren't so sad. For most of my life, Richard Carter had loved courtrooms when they belonged to other people. He enjoyed judging neighbors, criticizing relatives, and explaining exactly how everyone else had ruined their lives. Sitting in the gallery and watching someone else face consequences was one of his favorite hobbies. Now he sat at the defense table, and suddenly accountability felt unfair. The courtroom itself was smaller than most people imagine. Television dramas make everything look grand and theatrical. Real courtrooms are quieter, more restrained. The danger comes from facts, not speeches. I arrived early. My uniform was immaculate. Not because I wanted to impress anyone. Because that morning I had looked at myself in the mirror and remembered something important. For years, my father had treated my military service as if it were some strange hobby, a phase, an inconvenience, something less respectable than real estate commissions and expensive dinners. Yet every dollar he stole had come from that service. Every account he touched had been built through sacrifice he never acknowledged. That uniform wasn't for him. It never had been. Margaret met me near the entrance. "You ready?" she asked. I considered the question honestly. "No." She smiled slightly. "Good answer. Nobody is ever ready for this." Inside the courtroom, Sophia sat beside her attorney. She looked older. Not physically. Emotionally. The confidence that once seemed welded into her personality had cracked. Her hair was still perfect. Her clothes were still expensive. But something behind her eyes had changed. Fear leaves marks. Mark was there too. Not beside her. 3 rows back. That told me everything. My father noticed me as I entered. His expression hardened immediately. The same look he wore when I was a child and disagreed with him. The difference was that I wasn't a child anymore. And this wasn't his house. The hearing began. For hours, documents appeared. Bank records, transfer histories, credit applications, forged signatures, account authorizations, tax filings. Every piece of evidence added another brick to a wall my father could no longer climb over. The government's case wasn't dramatic. It was methodical. That made it devastating. One investigator explained how money moved between accounts. Another demonstrated the timeline of transfers. A forensic specialist compared signatures. The evidence showed patterns stretching back nearly a decade. My father had not made one bad decision. He had made hundreds. When his attorney finally stood to challenge the findings, the argument sounded weak even before they finished leaving his mouth. Misunderstanding. Family arrangement. Verbal permission. Clerical confusion. The problem with those explanations was simple. Records existed. Records don't care about emotions. Records don't care about family stories. Records don't care who raised you. They only care what happened. Around noon, the judge took a short recess. I stepped into a hallway lined with windows. Sunlight spilled across the polished floor. For the first time all morning, I allowed myself to breathe. Someone approached behind me. I didn't need to turn around. I knew who it was. Sophia. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "You really went through with it." I looked out the window. "You mean telling the truth?" She flinched. That surprised me. For years, Sophia had seemed immune to shame. Now I wasn't so sure. "You could have handled this privately." I finally turned toward her. Like Dad handled my money privately. Her eyes filled with tears, real tears this time. Not performance. Not manipulation. Pain. The sight affected me more than I expected. Because despite everything, she was still my sister. The girl who used to sit beside me during thunderstorms. The girl who once shared a bedroom with me. The girl who taught me how to ride a bicycle. People are rarely one thing. That's what makes betrayal so complicated. Sophia lowered her head. I didn't think he'd get caught. The words hung between us. Not denial. Not innocence. A confession. Small. Incomplete. But real. I studied her face. "You knew." She nodded. Slowly. I knew some of it. The hallway suddenly felt very quiet. Not because of what she said. Because of what she didn't. There are moments when the truth arrives so plainly that it removes all remaining doubt. This was one of them. I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them again. "I would have helped you." Her expression crumpled. "I know. That hurt more than anything else. Not the money, not the fraud, not the lies. The fact that she knew, and did it anyway." A court officer announced the end of recess. Sophia wiped her eyes. Neither of us said another word. We returned to the courtroom. The final phase moved quickly. By then, the evidence was overwhelming. Several accounts remained frozen. Civil recovery proceedings were approved. Additional financial penalties followed. Some assets were ordered liquidated. Certain transactions were reversed. The details mattered, but the emotional reality mattered more. The empire my father spent years building had collapsed. Not because of revenge. Because it had been built on theft. When the hearing ended, people slowly began filing out. Attorneys packed briefcases. Reporters gathered notes. Families whispered. The room felt exhausted. My father remained seated. For the first time in my life, he looked old. Not weak, just tired. As if carrying years of arrogance had finally become heavy. I should have left. Maybe that would have been smarter. Instead, I walked over. Margaret started to say something, then stopped. My father looked up when I approached. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "You won." I considered that, then shook my head. "No." His eyebrows pulled together. I continued. "There was never supposed to be a winner." Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or maybe only exhaustion. It didn't matter. Because accountability and understanding are not the same thing. Some people understand too late. Some never do. He stared at the floor. "I was trying to help your sister." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because after everything, he still couldn't say the words. "I stole from you." Instead, he wrapped the truth in justification. The same way he always had. I nodded once, then reached into my bag and placed a photograph on the table. It was an old picture. Mom standing between Sophia and me. All three of us smiling. Dad had taken it years ago at a lake near our hometown. My father stared at it. His face changed. Just slightly, but enough. "I kept that because of Mom," I said. His throat moved. For a second, he looked like he wanted to say something meaningful. Something honest. Maybe even an apology. But no words came. I waited. Nothing. Finally, I stepped back and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. Months passed. Then more months. Life slowly became quieter. The legal process recovered most of the stolen money. The compensation wasn't perfect. Nothing could return the lost years. But it was enough. Enough to move forward. I bought my first home the following spring. Not a mansion. Not a luxury estate. Just a beautiful house with a wide porch, a maple tree in the front yard, and enough space for peace. The day I received the keys, I sat alone in the empty living room for nearly an hour. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Dust floated lazily through the air. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. Not because my father lost. Not because Sophia suffered consequences. But because I finally stopped carrying responsibilities that never belonged to me. A few weeks later, while unpacking boxes, I found one of my grandmother's old letters. She had written it years before she died. One sentence had been underlined twice. "The people who truly love you never feel entitled to what you've earned." I sat there reading those words over and over. Eventually, I framed the letter. It still hangs in my house today. Sometimes visitors ask about it. I always smile. Because those words cost me $600,000 to fully understand. But they taught me something worth far more. Family is not defined by who shares your blood. Family is defined by who protects your peace when they have the power to destroy it. And my father never understood that. The night he emptied my bank